zeroing in on party platforms this Saturday night. Mark Carney unveils the costed Liberal plan, promising new health and defense funding and no tax hikes.
This plan meets the moment with overwhelming force.
While the NDP pledges more doctors, affordable housing and a wealth tax to help pay for it. Pierre Poilievre says the Conservative platform is coming soon as he announces a mandatory drug treatment plan for prisoners. Plus, constitutional clash, a Supreme Court ruling halting President Trump's plan to deport Venezuelans. And whiteout fever in Winnipeg.
We're making it to the end.
After a first-place finish, the Jets kick off their Stanley Cup chase.
Global National, reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. With less than 10 days to go until Canadians choose their next leader, two major federal parties have finally unveiled their full platforms. Liberal leader Mark Carney and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh laid out their plans, each promising billions in new spending. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who has yet to release his fully costed plan, is already criticizing the Liberals' platform as too expensive. We'll have more on that in a moment, but we begin tonight with a closer look at what the parties are promising and how it could affect you. David Akin begins with the Liberal plan, which calls for $130 billion in new spending over 4 years. David?
Well, Neither, what we've got is a 67-page platform that puts some details into the broad plan that Liberal leader Mark Carney has been talking about throughout this campaign. And of course, it's a plan that Carney says is set up to protect Canada from the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs. And Donald Trump, by the way, is mentioned 8 times in this platform, and Carney's chief political rival, Pierre Poilievre, is mentioned just 6 times.
This plan meets the moment with overwhelming force.
Over the course of the campaign, Carney has talked about promises to reduce internal trade barriers, to improve energy independence, and to build more homes. The platform confirmed commitments to maintain national pharmacare, national dental care, and to keep the $10 a day child care plans. But new promises are also revealed. Promises you'll likely hear Carney talk about in the last week of the campaign, such as Liberals are promising to spend $4 billion to build more hospitals and medical clinics, to give personal support workers an $1,100 a year refundable tax credit. There's $167 million for rural transit, and a plan to spend $2.5 billion on digital infrastructure to support artificial intelligence and high-capacity telecom networks.
Our plan to unite, to secure, to protect and build.
The cost of all the new measures the Liberals are proposing add up to $130 billion over the next 4 years. The single biggest spending amount will be $19 billion in additional money for defense. And that extra spending, the Liberals say, will get Canada to the NATO commitment of spending 2% of GDP. Now, that will be offset by an expected $20 billion in tariff revenue, and then an additional $32 billion in savings. Savings the Liberals think they can find by finding ways to make the government run cheaper.
Our plan gets government spending under control because the government has been spending too much.
So what's the government's bottom line? Well, there are nothing but deficits in the 4-year forecast the Liberals have presented, but the debt to GDP ratio should decline. Now, what's your bottom line? Well, there are no proposed tax hikes. In fact, there are tax cuts in the platform that the Liberals hope to ride to a 4th consecutive win. Nitu.
All right, David Akin in Peterborough, Ontario. Thanks, David. Now to the NDP announcement, which, like that of its political rivals, pledges to improve affordability if elected. The NDP also has a large focus on expanding health care. Nathaniel Dove has the breakdown.
No more choosing between your well-being and your bank account.
Jagmeet Singh unveiling the new Democrat costed platform. That adds up to $48 billion over the next 4 years, on top of what the federal budget already projects, for a total deficit of $156 billion.
In a difficult time, which a recession and a trade war represent some of the most difficult times, you can't cut your way out of those things.
The focus and most expensive item is expanded health care.
We'll guarantee access to a family doctor or primary care team by 2030. We'll hire more healthcare workers.
The platform has more doctors and nurses, farmer care, and more mental health help, costing $46 billion. Measures to make housing more affordable will cost $25 billion, while removing GST on essentials like grocery store meals, internet, and home heating bills will cost an NDP government a projected $18 billion.
Paid for by ending handouts to oil and gas CEOs, by bringing in a wealth tax on fortunes over $10 million, by putting a surtax on corporate profits over $500 million, and by cracking down on tax havens and loopholes.
Those measures will bring in $133 billion, according to the platform. With the New Democrats trailing in the polls, Singh says he'd support a minority government if it takes measures to lower grocery and home prices and if there are no cuts to health care. But he pointed out he still has 9 days before the election to get more votes. Nathaniel Dove, Global News, Toronto.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was back in BC today, taking aim at Mark Carney's fiscal plan. He says a Tory-led government would make life more affordable, unlike the Liberals, but still won't say when his full platform will be released. Paul Johnson has more on the Conservative pushback and a new promise Poilievre says will help fight crime in Canada.
We now know that life will get even more expensive if the Liberals get that fourth term.
Back in British Columbia, the Conservative leader began his day with an attack on the newly released Liberal Party platform. For the party whose preferred color is red, Pierre Poilievre says their document is all but covered with red ink.
Amazingly, Mr. Carney plans to run even bigger inflationary deficits than Justin Trudeau had already budgeted. Together, the previously budgeted Trudeau deficits, combined with the new spending Mr. Carney announced today, will mean $250 billion of new inflationary debt.
Well, Poilievre claimed he would deliver more fiscally sound budgets and give Canadians a tax break. He declined to answer reporters' questions about where his fully costed platform is, only to say that 90% of it is already public.
We'll shut down the drug dens and replace them with treatment centres.
Next, Poilievre pivoted to a topic that's been top of mind in the Vancouver suburb of Richmond: drug policy, announcing a Conservative government would hand judges the power to order treatment for some suffering from substance abuse disorder. In recent years, Richmond has seen large demonstrations against a provincial plan to establish a safe consumption site in the city.
We will give judges the power to order mandatory treatment for those suffering from addiction that has spun out of their control.
So BC right now appears to have more seats in play than in any of the previous elections of the Trudeau era, and two of them are right here in Richmond, a place where Mr. Poilievre's stance on drug policy is particularly well received. No surprise, he'd be devoting some time to Richmond in the last part of the campaign, where they may have a couple of pickups. Neetu, back to you.
All right, Paul Johnson in Richmond, BC. Thanks, Paul.
And I already know who I'm voting for, so just get it over with.
It's quite the turnout here. I had to bring my brown-law here at this polling station. My wife and I were at the other one on the west side. It was a lot of people,
How long did you wait in line?
Probably an hour and a half.
Early voting is surging across the country with record-breaking turnout this holiday weekend. Elections Canada estimates nearly 2 million ballots were cast yesterday alone, and the rush isn't over. Voters have until Monday at 9 p.m. to vote early. And we'll have full coverage of the federal election on Monday, April 28th. Watch Decision Canada live on election night starting at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, right here on Global and on all our streaming platforms. Dry, windy weather is fueling wildfires in Alberta, including one east of Edmonton that shut down part of the city's Ring Road. Further east, a separate blaze has destroyed several buildings at a well-known open-air museum. That fire was first reported Friday afternoon near the Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Village, a popular tourist and educational site. The blaze shut down parts of the Trans-Canada Highway and triggered evacuations in the area. Those have since been lifted, but multiple structures at the museum were severely damaged. People in Ukraine are on edge ahead of Easter, despite the Russian president declaring a truce. Air raid sirens sounded over Kyiv just hours after Vladimir Putin announced a two-day halt to all military activities until midnight Sunday. But Ukrainians remain skeptical. Russia targeted Kharkiv on Good Friday and Odessa overnight. President Volodymyr Zelensky posted on X saying Russian drones over Ukrainian cities reveal Putin's true attitude toward Easter and human life. Many Ukrainians share that view.
I do not believe it. He never keeps his word, even on Good Friday.
I do not trust Putin at all. I do not know how one can trust him. I do not see anything positive that would indicate it can happen.
But there is some hope. Today, Ukraine welcomed home 277 prisoners of war following the largest exchange with Russia since the beginning of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine more than 3 years ago. In the U.S., the Supreme Court has temporarily blocked the Trump administration from deporting another group of Venezuelan migrants. It's the latest sign of growing skepticism over the administration's use of expanded powers under a rarely used wartime law. As Reggie Cicchini reports, critics say the White House is pushing the limits of the U.S. Constitution.
The U.S. president's campaign pledge to crack down on illegal immigration faces a new roadblock.
A judge wasn't elected to do that. I was elected to do that.
On Friday, an 11th-hour plea from the American Civil Liberties Union sought to halt the deportation of dozens of Venezuelan men being held in a Texas facility, asking the court to preserve the status quo so the men will not be sent to a notorious prison in El Salvador, where more than 200 people have already been sent using a 1700s-era law known as the Alien Enemies Act.
This statute was designed for wartime. The statute gives the president the power to detain or deport nationals of the country with which we are at war.
The White House says its actions are lawful and that these men are gang members. But the Supreme Court responded in favor of the detainees, saying the government is directed not to remove any member until further order.
For the Supreme Court to weigh in at 1 a.m. on a Saturday tells you that the Supreme Court does not have faith that the government of the United States of America will follow through on the orders that it receives from the Supreme Court.
The administration still faces a potential contempt charge after it refused to turn around a flight to Venezuela back in March and has fought the court on providing details.
I definitely think that he's been using some of these cases for political wins.
The Supreme Court has said Trump can use the Alien Act if deportees are afforded a chance to plead their cases, something lawyers in Texas allege was denied and fear could result in more mistakes, like with the detention of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, deported on a paperwork error without due process.
The Trump administration is asserting a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons.
Legal scholars are concerned if Trump chooses to ignore this ruling or any others, a constitutional crisis could emerge. Reggie Cicchini, Global News, Washington.
More deadly Israeli airstrikes coming up as the civilian toll mounts, why the fate of the last living Israeli-American hostage remains uncertain. Orthodox Christians celebrated the lighting of the Holy Fire on Saturday. The Greek patriarch emerged with 2 candles believed to be divinely lit, then passed the flame to thousands. The Holy Fire, considered a miracle, occurs each year on Holy Saturday at the site where, according to tradition, Jesus was crucified and buried. In Gaza, a fresh round of Israeli airstrikes have killed dozens. According to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry, more than 90 Palestinians were killed in the past 48 hours. At least 11 of them were killed in bombardments that struck a camp for displaced civilians in Han Yunis. Israel recently offered a 45-day ceasefire to Hamas in return for the release of 10 more Israeli hostages. But Hamas insists it will only release more captives as part of a deal to end the war for good. Meanwhile, questions remain about the last living Israeli-American hostage in Gaza who went missing. 21-year-old Eden Alexander vanished earlier this week. Hamas claims it lost contact with the militants holding him during an Israeli strike on Tuesday and says one of his guards has been found dead. Alexander's disappearance comes days after Hamas released an undated video appearing to show him alive. Iran's foreign minister says high-stakes nuclear talks with the U.S. have been constructive and moving forward. It's the second indirect meeting between both sides this week over President Trump's demands for Iran to wind down its nuclear capabilities and threats of U.S. military action. A third round of negotiations will happen next week. Rights and regulations clash. Ahead, new rules and reallocated quotas stir tension on East Coast rivers. The lucrative baby eel fishery is back in Atlantic Canada after last year's shutdown over illegal fishing and violence. But long-standing disputes over rules continue to divide Indigenous communities and commercial fishers. As Heidi Petracek explains, recent federal changes to the fishery have done little to quell those tensions.
As the sun sets, members of Siboney First Nation set their nets to harvest elvers on a river near Halifax.
These guys that are going to be fishing here, they're the front lines for rights holders.
The tiny baby eels only emerge at night, and once they're caught, are sold mostly to China for upwards of $1,500 per kilogram.
It just feels great being out here, with my community, fishing to support our family and our right to do that.
Rampant poaching and violence has forced the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to shut down the lucrative fishery before. To try to regain control this year, the DFO introduced new rules and reallocated quota from commercial harvesters to new Mi'kmaq participants. For this year, 8 Mi'kmaq First Nations came up with their own elver harvest plans, allocating quota to individual Mi'kmaq harvesters. The bands negotiated with the DFO for access to specific rivers, but 3 other First Nations didn't like the deal and say their treaty right to fish means they don't have to obey Ottawa. That's led to confrontations. Like this arrest of an Indigenous harvester police say obstructed fishery officers. He denies that and suffered what RCMP called minor injuries in the process.
There seems to be a lack of political will to police it properly.
Commercial harvester Mark Weldon, who's been fishing elvers for decades, feels caught in the middle.
I'm not frustrated. I'm done.
He calls the DFO poaching tip line about the unlicensed Indigenous fishers, but says officers rarely show up.
Yeah, it is an election issue. It's my livelihood. I got to make a living.
He goes elsewhere to dip his nets.
Probably 1.5 kilos.
Weldon can't catch as much as he used to, and when the federal government cut quotas to distribute to First Nations, commercial fishers weren't compensated. This longtime harvester is seeking damages in a lawsuit filed against present and former fisheries ministers and 10 DFO bureaucrats as a result.
My partners and I bought an eel farm, an eel license, an eel quota with locations for millions of dollars to get into this business. So yeah, I was pretty upset.
Something so small and so valuable is still causing big problems this elver season. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Hubbards, Nova Scotia.
Round 1 showdown. Next, the Winnipeg Jets start their playoff run and kick off a citywide whiteout. The NHL playoffs get underway tonight. This year, 5 Canadian teams made the cut, and the Winnipeg Jets are the first to face off against the St. Louis Blues. The Jets were the best team in the league during the regular season, and fans are in a frenzy. Our Melissa Ridgen is soaking up the atmosphere there. Melissa?
That's right, me too. The Jets may call the NHL's smallest city home. They play in the league's smallest arena, but you would not know it out here where the fan base is large, it's loud, and it's growing by the day. The Jets had an extraordinary regular season, their best ever, but now the real work begins.
All systems have been firing at Dreamcatcher Promotions.
The first round, the Jets have ordered 90,000 towels, so we've just completed 50,000 towels for the first 4 games. After that, we'll be printing as we go through the playoffs.
So you're basically going to be busy for the next few months because obviously
we're making it to the end.
It's important work. Without these rally towels, this can't happen.
Season ticket holder, Jets fan, so this is so exciting for us and our team.
Colleen and Dave Kramer are Jets superfans, as you might guess from their basement.
This is one of the biggest things we have, I think, is the Jets, and everybody just rallies around it, whether they are hockey fans or not. You can feel the excitement in the air.
And hear it. Jets fan Dan Nolan is a lifelong supporter who, like many, stepped up their fandom when Winnipeg got its team back after 15 years away.
When they left, yeah, that was didn't like that. But then when they came back, they're back, and as soon as when the playoffs start, yeah, I'm rocking and rolling out there.
They're rocking on the ice, too, boasting the league's deadliest power play and its stingiest defense.
But if there ever was a season to believe in this team, this is the one. They finished first for a reason. It's because they can win games in multiple fashions. They can defend and they can score goals, and they got the best goalie in the National Hockey League.
Speaking of goalies, this series is a rematch of February's Four Nations face-off final as Connor Hellebuck will be opposed by Canadian Jordan Binnington in net for the St. Louis Blues. But Neetu, after the heartbreak of losing the team in 1996 and then getting the Jets back in 2011, and now seeing them dominate all season long, you cannot blame Jets fans for going into a frenzy now, putting the hockey world on notice that the road to the Stanley Cup goes through Winnipeg this year. Neetu?
Yeah, the energy is undeniable. Melissa Ridgen in Winnipeg. Thanks, Melissa. That is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada showcases Caledon, BC, Heart's Delight, Islington, Newfoundland and Labrador, and St. John, New Brunswick. Keep them coming. Send your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks so much for watching and hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.